One of the most satisfying parts of collecting for a console is picking out which games you want. After all, most of our favorite consoles offer a wide variety of games to choose from. Naturally though, some people say, "How dare you try to make me choose? I'll be having everything, thank you very much." It's like if you went to a restaurant and when the waiter asked you for your order, you were like, "Screw you, buddy, I'll take everything on the menu." So why do some people try to collect every single game for a certain console? Well, at the heart of it, these people are best friends with whatever console it is that they're collecting for, so one of the most natural progressions is to collect every game for it. I mean, why stop at collecting all the good games for a console when there's so many bad games that you could be collecting too? Something that tends to happen when you're collecting games for a particular console is the more games you collect, the slimmer the pickings get when you look to add even more. Eventually you get to the point where you're like, yeah, I think I've pretty much got all the games I like now. So for somebody completing a set, it's not just about having all the games they like. I mean, even the most hardcore fan of a system will tell you that there are bad games in the library. It's basically impossible for there not to be. But when the entire library for a console is all together, it takes on new meaning. It's about having a piece of history. You can see every game released for the console all in one glimpse, and it puts the library into perspective. You can see how many of each type of game was released, observe certain trends, and even the stinkers in the library help put the really good games into a more defined context. It almost serves as more of a reference than a collection of games. I tend to think of collections as more of a personalized thing, where it's interesting to see what somebody does have in addition to what they don't have. With a complete set, it's just like, yep, I got everything. Imagine somebody with a complete set going to check out somebody else who also has that complete set. What do you got? Oh, the exact same games I have too? Nice. But even besides simply owning a complete set, there's still a big part of it, and I mean a big part of it, that is the journey itself and getting to that point. After all, going after any complete set will often take years and or a lot of money. And technically, anybody can say that they're pursuing a complete set. Check out my PSP collection. Am I there yet? I've certainly noticed that some people going after complete sets can be far more passive compared to others who can be super aggressive. There's really quite a range. For example, fellow YouTuber and fan of the show Console Collector has a complete North American GameCube library that he completed pretty quickly. He was really searching consistently and to his credit still got some amazing deals. I say this because oftentimes trying to rush collecting will lead to paying more than you would have had you been patient. As a result, for some of the folks who are on the more passive end of the spectrum when it comes to completing a full set, their mindset could be as simple as, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a full set. Like, maybe if somebody gave it all to me for free one day. I think a lot of it comes down to how exciting the hunt itself is. Trying to track down every single one presents a challenge, and making progress can get you really hooked. I mean, heck, just look at what a killing Pokemon has made. Gotta catch 'em all. By the way, as of this video, there are apparently something like over 800 different Pokemon. Good luck with that one, all you Pokemon masters. Take me back to the good old days of 151. When you need to get every single game for a console, suddenly games you probably wouldn't have given a darn about otherwise are now given a whole new level of intrigue. It's no longer as much about the game itself as it is how hard it is to track it down. What's interesting about that is if the point is just collecting for the thrill of the chase, it almost seems like it could really be anything that you're collecting at that point. Pogs, Beanie Babies, different colored bread bag clips, am I right? But I say almost seems like because there is still value to collecting video games specifically. They can be organized, stared at, talked about, and most importantly, played. Unless we're talking about collectors who only collect sealed games, most collectors will actually play their games. Maybe not all of them, and maybe no longer than a few minutes each for some of them, but they do play them. Plus, one nice benefit about having every game for a console, you know those certain games for each console that make you think, do I really want this game? Well, it's time to hop off that fence, my friend, because there are no games to be missed with a complete set. That's not to say every person who collects a complete set has a paranoia of missing out, but it sure does make your games wanted list a lot simpler. I think the idea of going after a complete set has probably crossed most of our minds at one point or another. The first thought usually goes something like this: dear me, I really like the Sega Genesis, don't I? Wouldn't it be great if I had all the Sega Genesis? Sure would. Okay, so what will it take to do that? How about thousands of dollars on a game called Outback Joey alone, among other things? Yeah, your dedication is going to be put to the test. When you actually start looking into what it would take to complete a set, only then do you truly realize what an undertaking it is. For example, all those sports games, you may think, whatever, sports games are cheap, I can scoop those up, no problem. But even if you get them for a few bucks each, it adds up. And when it's all said and done, you've potentially spent hundreds of dollars on sports games. And then you may think, do I really even want them? I always find it funny when somebody gets really close to the end of completing a set, and there's just a handful of games left they need. Of course, those games that are left are usually pretty expensive and/or rare and/or terrible games. I almost get the impression it's like taking medicine for those people at that point. Yeah, it's gonna taste awful, but you gotta do it. Certain consoles are definitely more doable than others, with a lot of this coming down to the size of the library itself. My hope would be that's not the main motivating reason for going after a complete set, and I don't think it is, otherwise everybody would be going after complete Virtual Boy sets. Oh, console collector, you rascal. Either way, the size of a library is definitely a determining factor. For example, I don't think anybody has ever looked somebody in the eye with a straight face and said, hey, guess what? You know the North American PS2 library? Over 1,850 games? Guess who's gonna collect them all? Me. You'd probably have that friend, in addition to all your other friends, at your house the next day for an intervention. But that's not to say there aren't other complete sets people go after that might seem insane. Heck, one of the most popular complete sets that I've seen people try for is the NES. Certainly not because it's the easiest, that's for sure. The NES has a ton of games that are notorious for being really bad and yet still really expensive. To me, that shows the power of what going for a complete set can drive a fan to do. It makes sense why the NES would be such a popular choice to go after. It has an extremely varied mix of games on it, not to mention it's very iconic and culturally significant, at least in the United States it is. People tend to stick to their own region when going for full sets too. After all, it's probably the region they're most familiar with and comes in a language they can actually read. Even for some of the popular Japanese libraries, like say the Sega Saturn, yeah, most Saturn collections should probably have some imports in them, but to try to collect every single one is just insane. There were so many games released over there, and some of them are just flat out bizarre. If you're wondering what my personal opinion is on whether or not people should go for complete sets, well, I'd say it's probably not for most people. It definitely is for some people. It really just comes down to what works best for each person on an individual basis, much like all of our preferences when it comes to video games in general. Some people may only have a few games for a console, and some may have an entire set. Most of us are going to be somewhere in the middle, but I don't think there's a wrong answer so long as you're getting a lot of enjoyment out of it and it's not stressing you out in any way. But with that said, I am curious how many of you either have a complete set for a given console or have seriously thought about going after a set at some point. I'd be really curious to hear what you have to say about it as always. So with that, leave your comment down below and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the Retro Bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games.